if enough people ask for physical delivery, it can just decline. It can force them to settle in cash. And this is the silver squeeze. As far as I'm concerned, this is exactly what I'm waiting for. I'm waiting for the Comex to admit that it cannot deliver physical silver. And I expect that once this declaration comes, once this admission that there is a shortage of silver, once it comes, then you're going to see a rush to acquire physical silver. And the shelves of every bullion dealer in the world will be wiped out overnight.
Hello and welcome. Thanks for joining us today. Silver has broken out and is about $38 per ounce at the time that we recorded this, which makes many people wonder, what will a silver squeeze look like? I am joined by Oren Elbaz, also known as the Silver Hermit, to consider what the end game for silver could look like. Oren, welcome back. How's it going today?
Hello, everything is fine. How do you do?
I'm doing great.
Okay, I think we should start this show by warning people that, on this show, we're going to allow ourselves to be a bit more speculative and a bit less cautious than usual, and just give you our wild predictions as to what may happen when we do get a silver squeeze and when silver really breaks out. So I just want to tell people to take everything in this show with a grain of salt. These are just theories of ours. And you always need to stack responsibly. It means don't overextend yourselves, buy as much as you reasonably can afford, and don't take any debt and don't use any leverage. And just remember that it's more important to be able to keep your ounces than to have more ounces.
Absolutely. It's good to view this as your extra money. Something that you're comfortable just putting away for a long time, and that's when you're going to see the biggest benefit. And you definitely don't want to end up in a situation where you're, having to go sell this before you were able to benefit from it. So, how would we know that a silver squeeze had started?
Yeah, so let's explain what is a silver squeeze because I think it's a term which is being used very often, but I think most people don't really understand how it will look or how it will unfold. A silver squeeze is very different from a short squeeze, a regular short squeeze. In a short squeeze, the shorts are overwhelmed by people purchasing whatever it is, a stock, some kind of an asset. There's not enough of it. The amount is limited, so the shorts have to bail out. They have to close their positions. And how do they do that? In order to close a short position, you of course need to buy the underlying asset. So there's suddenly you see the spike in the price because people need to buy the asset in order to close their short positions. And with silver, it's not going to work this way because on the COMEX, theoretically, those big banks who are active in the precious metals market, they can sell you as many futures contracts as they wish. Theoretically, there's no limit on the amount of short contracts that they can generate. And of course, for you to buy a long contract, someone has to buy a short contract because the two are created together. What they do is they loan or they buy silver from London and they sell you a futures contract. And as though they are balanced because they have silver in London and they're selling you a futures contract in New York. But we suspect that the LBMA doesn't hold enough silver to back all those contracts because, it's using a fractional reserve system. It has only a small float, a limited amount of physical silver, and it keeps selling it again and again to multiple owners. And if no one comes asking for the physical silver, then this shell game can continue indefinitely.
Yeah, they can just keep it going forever.
Yes. So a real silver squeeze will only happen once enough people ask for physical delivery. Because eventually, the amount of silver available to be delivered is very small compared to the amount of contracts exchanging hands, even on a daily basis, as we've seen recently. I mean,
Right.
just recently, I've posted about it on X, and it got a bit viral. That there was an
Yes.
hour, just one single hour, in which 483 million ounces of silver were traded on the Comex. Yeah, and this
That,
happened right after a breakout, a significant breakout. I'm assuming in an attempt to suppress that breakout, and it didn't work. The price jumped soon after, reaching $39 an ounce.
and so now all of those shorts are underwater, as you had pointed out in the post. And this is estimated to be about 57% of the annual mine supply.
These are
Um,
crazy, crazy numbers. I mean, like it's
ab-
insane that you can
Absolutely.
sell more than half of the annual mine supply within an hour. But it can only be done because people are not asking for physical delivery. They're settling in cash at the end of the month. So you can continue this game.
Now, the current above ground stockpile of investment grade silver could easily get wiped out by investors. And why would I say that? Well, I asked an AI to estimate the total value of all the investment grade silver globally, and it came up with a figure of $1.5 trillion dollars. Well, Apple has a market cap of 3.13 trillion. If you could imagine just half of the money invested in just Apple poured into the silver market, it could wipe it out.
And probably the true value of that above ground investment grade silver, it's probably even lower than that. Those estimates are usually quite generous.
Yeah, so that's important to keep in mind too. But I mean, there's seven companies with a market cap that would be higher than that already high estimate. So it just gives you an idea of how small this market really is. I mean, it would seem likely if a lot of investors start to get interested in silver, it could cause the price to move up very quickly.
So a silver squeeze will only happen once enough people demand physical delivery. And as it happens, the exchange, the COMEX, is not obliged to deliver all that physical silver. If enough people ask for physical delivery, it can just decline. It can force them to settle in cash. And this is the silver squeeze. As far as I'm concerned, this is exactly what I'm waiting for. I'm waiting for the COMEX to admit that it cannot deliver physical silver. And I expect that once this declaration comes, once this admission that there is a shortage of silver, once it comes, then you're going to see a rush to acquire physical silver. And the shells of every bullion dealer in the world will be wiped out overnight.
Yeah, absolutely. The market is positioned to get wiped out, by a scenario like this. Of course, they can settle out all those contracts in cash. And so they can just shut that whole system down, at the blink of an eye if they want to. And, they're not going to have to worry about that.
Yeah, so I suspect that, for instance, you're a silver stacker and you get up in the morning and you may read on X some post that the COMEX has forced cash settlement. Someone defaulted on physical delivery and there was a forced cash settlement. And it's going to be quite obscure. Very few people are going to even hear about it. Only the people who are interested in precious metals to begin with. And then you may enter, for instance, your online dealer, the website you usually buy silver from, and it's going to be unavailable.
Right.
Perhaps perhaps there's going to be a small notice. Oh, we're out of supply. Please come back later. Something like that.
Right. Would you like to place an order possibly if they know they got some stuff coming in. But they could go in and wipe out those online dealers really quick.
Yeah.
And who knows? It could just be of a lot of investors. It could be industry, whoever gets panicked.
Those who were not able to get physical silver from the Comex, I expect them to panic. I expect them to go to every bullion dealer across the world and buy whatever is available for sale.
That makes sense. And of course, I mean, we are talking about big players. They were trying to take 5,000 ounce bars off the Comex.
They'll
And
buy whatever is
right,
available. They'll buy the 100-ounce bars, the 10-ounce bars. They'll even buy the coins if they are desperate enough.
sure, absolutely. And they're going to have a lot of money to throw around, in a coin shop environment, like, let's say, or a big online dealer.
So the big mystery, I think, is what will be the official price in such a situation? I suspect that if you check the official price, it won't change. Look, if I were the COMEX and I knew that there is a panic taking place, there is a run on physical silver, I wouldn't advertise it by publishing the true price of silver. I would just post $30, $40. Just, the price of the previous day.
That makes sense.
By looking at the official price, you wouldn't even know that a silver squeeze is taking place. See what I mean?
Sure, absolutely. Hey,
So, how will it manifest itself? Only in the premiums. I think the premiums will start skyrocketing to such an extent that perhaps they're going to be multiples of the official price.
that's interesting. I mean, and I could totally see that happening where the price for physical just detaches from the paper price. Everyone just recognizes that's not the real price you'll pay, and they just kind of start ignoring it. I could totally see a scenario like that.
Yes, yes. This is what we call the bifurcation, and it has been predicted, long ago by analysts, far more experienced than you and I.
Right.
And yes, and I wouldn't be surprised if you enter, for instance, AppMax, and there's going to be very, very few products that you can buy, and the price is going to be outrageous. I mean, like multiples of the official price. So only the very desperate people going to buy silver in such a situation.
Right, absolutely. And I could see even jewelry items selling for, who knows, three, four times what they should be in an environment like that where people are just scrambling to find anything that they can. Of course, if the price rises enough, you'll see certain industries start to pick up. And I think that some folks are thinking, well, if the price rises enough, eventually recycling would really start to pick up, for example. But I do question if recycling could actually like effectively fill that void in the silver market if something like this was going on. Recycling a cell phone, for example, doesn't seem very efficient to me, especially for a situation like this where there's a lot of people looking for the metal. I mean, it's been estimated the average cell phone has about 0.34 grams of silver in it. Well, in order to get 1 troy ounce of silver from recycled cell phones, you'd have to recycle about 93 of them. And so if you could imagine, I mean, some individuals would start to engage in, extracting precious metals from the old printed circuit boards and things like that, in phones or computers or whatever. But it's really going to have to be companies that do the heavy lifting in regards to bringing any noticeable amount of silver to the market through, recycling e-waste. I don't see that doing anything.
Yes, so the recycling is a very interesting point because there's a limited recycling capacity. If you think about the large refineries in Switzerland, the leading refineries, they can only refine so much silver every year. They just don't have the machinery and the manpower to do that, to increase that capacity. So no matter if you get people trying to sell, suddenly you get a price spike and people want to sell their old silverware back to be refined to, investment grade silver. There's not enough refining capacity to do that. So there's only going to be a trickle of new investment grade products to answer that increased
The
investment demand. And at the same time, you and I have discussed at length the fact that the mining industry is insensitive to the price of silver. It's unable to respond. If the price spikes, as we've described, it is unable to increase production to a meaningful degree. So I expect there to be a dramatic increase in investment demand, and the industry is going to be overwhelmed. It won't be able to respond, not from new supply coming from mines, nor from the recycling side of the industry. So there's just going to be a very small trickle of product coming to the market, not enough to answer that investment demand. And so that initial spike, which I described, I think it's just going to be the beginning of the bull market in silver.
Right. The silver market is not going to be able to effectively respond to this situation by increased mining or increased recycling. It's just not going to be in the cards. And even once it does pick up, it's not going to be noticeable, even if they do start recycling more, during this upcoming cycle.
So from that point on, I expect there to be, this self-reinforcing loop. And, I discussed this and I've created a chart which demonstrates this idea in a recent video that I made. It's called Explosive, and it talks about the explosive potential of silver. And I recommend that everyone check it out because it's a short video, and it really illustrates it, visually.
Yeah,
How
definitely check it out. I'll leave a link to it in the description.
Thanks. So I think that the increased investment demand and the fact that supply is so limited, it's going to create this self-reinforcing loop in which the rising price generates more investment demand, which generates a higher price, which generates more investment demand, and it's going to be self-reinforcing until the point in which the price is so high that it becomes prohibitively expensive. I mean, right now, silver is still very, very cheap if you compare it to the amount of dollars just slushing around there in the market. I mean, like the price would have to
Absolutely.
be many multiples of the current price in order to, force people to buy less. Because right now, the average person can just, enter a coin shop and just buy 10 ounces, 100 ounces. Just imagine that the price needs to rise significantly so that people will be forced to, settle for 1 ounce, 2 ounces, as they do with gold, for instance.
Right. Absolutely. In these situations, there's only going to be so many things they can invest in. And so I do see a situation where even people might start going after the jewelry and the silverware, just anything that they know has silver in it. And so just keep that in mind, folks. If you're going to sell your old silverware, you might want to check what the spot price looks like that day.
Yeah, so let's continue. So I think that if the price of silver really starts running, and I think it's going to be, dominated by investment demand, I think this will effectively remonetize silver. I, I don't know if the governments of the world will officially recognize silver as money, but I think people will start using it as money. And I suspect that this will coincide with a decline in the purchasing power of the dollar. And I think the fact that people will be scrambling to ditch their dollars and exchange them, for instance, for silver, I think that's going to speed up the velocity of those dollars in circulation. And, this is
Sure.
going to lead to very high inflation, perhaps even a hyperinflation of the dollar. We've discussed this concept many times. We've had this video, we've called it the whiskey theory. This idea as though the increasing velocity of the dollar is more important even than the quantity of dollars in circulation because it creates the feeling, the appearance as though there are more dollars. So as silver becomes money again, I expect the fiat dollar to lose value very rapidly.
I mean, that makes sense. And of course, it could really exacerbate the situation. I think, we're probably going to see the GSR break under 50. And the reason I say that is because over the last 15 years, we saw it dip under 50, for multiple months during the second half of 2010 and in early 2011. So I think it's likely we'll see that again, in this cycle. But of course, I mean, and, nothing's guaranteed, but that's just me looking back. But I feel like it could go much lower than that as well, especially if we're experiencing a high inflation situation, like a hyperinflation situation. And so if we're also in a situation at the same time where investors have wiped out the physical supply, and so I'd be looking for the GSR to break, way down in the 30s, the 20s, maybe lower. But I would really want to try and capitalize on a situation like that.
Yes, I agree completely. I think gold and platinum will follow suit. I think their prices will rise as well, but I think silver will outperform them both. And I do think, as you say, I do think that the gold to silver ratio will decline and that it will probably return to its historical value. I mean, like seeing a 1 to 15 ratio makes perfect sense to me because this is the historic value. And if we look at the mining ratio, it's even lower than that. It's 1 to 7. So why should we
Right.
not see a return of the gold to silver ratio back to historic levels?
Right. Absolutely. I don't know why we might not see that. If all the conditions are there, it just seems like it could go, you know, parabolic in regards to the price.
Now, I wanted to discuss, the economic implications of such a silver squeeze and how it may affect the economy as a whole. Now, I think that this effectively will mean that the current monetary system no longer exists. And, I think that banks may collapse. And I think that those who will survive the ordeal, they will no longer be able to issue unlimited amounts of credit as they can do today, because nowadays there's no boundary on the amount of credit that they can extend to their clients. And when silver becomes money again, then suddenly they have to, even if we still have paper currency, it has to be backed by physical silver. So there is a limit on the amount of credit that can be issued. And that's a completely different economy than the one we're used to. For instance, if you want to buy a house, you won't be able to get $1 million mortgage for it. So house prices will have to come down, and companies, corporations will not be able to borrow an unlimited amount of money also. So they're going to have to limit their operations only to the most profitable projects that they can prove in advance that are going to be profitable. They won't be able to engage in unprofitable projects as we've seen in recent years. Another thing that I wanted to address is amazing data point that I have here. I just saw that the amount of margin debt right now, which is effectively money which brokers and banks are lending to investors so that they can invest it in the stock market. It has reached $556 billion. So if you're asking me what is currently holding the stock market at an all-time high, this is it. It is the fact that banks are still able to issue an unlimited amount of credit to their clients and this way support the bubble. And in a world in which silver becomes money again, that won't be the case. You won't be able to borrow money in order to invest in the stock market. I expect interest rates to be much higher, and it just won't make sense for banks to lend you money to do such a thing. So I expect the stock market either to crash completely, or if not, then just to move sideways for a number of years, and then it doesn't crash on, on nominal terms, but it does crash in real terms.
That would be interesting to see that system, kind of falling apart. You had brought up real estate, and it does look like, at least here in the US, we could be lining up for a decent correction in the housing market soon. It looks like it's possible they're going to fire Powell. If the new person who's brought in doesn't cut rates too aggressively, and we still have some pretty high rates going into the winter, we'll probably see housing go down in price. And a lot of folks out there have been waiting for that. Some people have been calling for a pretty big correction in housing. And you had mentioned gold and platinum. I wonder if you think, let's just say, people were looking around. Do you think copper is something else that would be going up a lot in price in an environment like that?
No, I don't
Or
think so. Not initially, at least, because copper is still primarily an industrial metal. It will remain an industrial metal. And if you're going through this financial crisis, which I do expect as a result of that silver squeeze, then the industrial demand is going to fall, at least initially. And I think other commodities, which are not monetary, you could see an initial decline in their price. So I wouldn't want to be holding a lot of copper or copper related miners at that stage of the crisis.
gotcha.
Maybe later, maybe after things settle down, and maybe, when we go back to a more conservative kind of economy, once we get growth again, once we get the economy going again, then perhaps other commodities such as crude oil and copper are going to be more profitable. But at those initial stages, when you're in the midst of a crisis, I'd stick with gold and silver.
Okay, gotcha. And people do still recognize them as safe haven assets. That there's enough awareness of that.
Yes. So we've spoken about what may happen to the banks in a situation of a silver squeeze. Now let's talk about how governments will do, how governments will have to react. And again, credit won't be as available as it is today. So governments, they won't be able to run deficits anymore. They will be forced to balance their budgets. So just
Right.
imagine,
So,
there's so many government employees nowadays making excellent salaries and getting excellent benefits.
benefits. Hmm.
Yeah, sure. The government
And
won't be able to employ so many people.
right. And will they be able to keep as many people on welfare? Will they be able to keep as many people on these entitlement programs?
Yes, definitely. They won't be able to do that. It's going to be impossible. If you have to balance your budget and you can't run any deficits, now that means you have to slash those entitlements or, pay them with paper dollars, which are practically worthless. So either way, people won't be able to live on welfare anymore, and that includes people who receive a government pension and people who live on or expect to live on Social Security and all those welfare checks, everything. I expect everything to be gone almost overnight.
It wouldn't surprise me at all if you're right. And you could imagine a situation where these desperate people could potentially be going out there trying to find, any form of something that they even think resembles money. And I know copper isn't a monetary metal, but because it was in the pennies, people could be looking to rip a copper tubing out of walls just to get anything that might provide some sort of relief if they could resell it at the new inflated prices. And I mean, it might be anything. It might be a stack of bricks or just any hard asset that they think might have rode that inflation that they could resell just to get their hands on some money.
Yes. And I don't expect it to be pretty. I think it's going to be terrible. I think you're going to have riots in the streets. I think all those people who are currently dependent on government benefits are going to be out in the streets protesting. But There's nothing to do. The government won't have enough silver to feed them, clothe them, house them as it has today.
Right.
Nowadays, the government can just print unlimited amounts of paper currency and use it to support all these people who are living on benefits. And that power is going to be gone eventually.
Right. That absolutely makes sense. What do you think will happen to silver like in the market? Like, how do you think a situation like this would affect corporations that make um, items that are dependent on silver, like, computers, cell phones, things like that?
Okay, so corporations, they either won't be able to afford silver at all, or if they're making high-end products, such as, for instance, consumer electronics, then I expect them to, pay for silver through the nose. If they're using it very sparingly, and if there are only fractions of a gram of silver inside each and every iPhone, so I expect them to continue producing them, but the prices of those products will be much more expensive, and they'll probably produce less of them because there's going to be less of a demand. And so I expect consumer electronics to become something more rare, and perhaps only rich people will be able to afford owning those items.
So if you have a silver chain and a cell phone in this environment, you're doing very good.
Yeah, perhaps having a cell phone will again become a status symbol. Only rich people will be able to afford them, or have a flat screen TV, or even have internet connection at your home. I think these services will become, something only for the rich, only for rich people and stackers.
Right. That makes sense. And who knows really far down the road what this might look like. I do wonder sometimes, let's say, but long after we're dead and gone, and I could see an environment where it's unrecognizable to today. Possibly even more precious, considered to be more precious than gold at some point.
Yes. And if we're talking about corporations in general, I expect them to change the way they operate. I expect them to become a lot more conservative. Nowadays, you see corporations embarking on projects which are, hardly profitable simply because they can get credit for practically nothing. So, in such a situation, there are many unprofitable projects which seem to make sense when you can borrow money so cheaply. But as interest rates rise and as credit becomes more scarce, suddenly you have to reconsider each and every project and make sure that it's really going to be profitable. And you have to conduct yourself in a far more conservative way. So they're going to have fewer workers, and the benefits are going to be less lavish, and it's going to be tough. I don't want to give anyone the false impression. It's not going to be easy to live in such a world. Although silver stackers will benefit from such a scenario tremendously, but other people will do very badly in such a world.
Sure, absolutely. So, what do you think the world will be like in this environment globally? Like, do you think there will be a lot of conflict? Will this affect war?
Yes. So last but not least, I think it actually has the potential to pacify the world. Why? Because war is a very expensive thing. It always was a very expensive thing. And nowadays, we're able to fund wars through the printing of currency. And we're able to have these endless wars that last for years and years. Now, I want to remind people that prior to the 20th century, wars were limited. Even those wars which lasted for years usually only had a few decisive battles. It did not impact the people living in the cities, for instance. You've had two armies fighting in some field somewhere, and the amount of civilian casualties were limited. So I hope that the world will become a much more peaceful place if governments are no longer able to fund those infinite wars. And if they do embark on some conflict, it will have to be limited both in scope and in length. And I expect the world to be a more peaceful place. And that could be the best thing about this entire scenario of a civil squeeze.
Thank you for listening to the Silver Hermit podcast. If you like this content, please donate in the link which appears in the description below. Please subscribe to this channel and share it with your friends and family. Hit the bell icon to be notified whenever I release a new video. Remember, I'm not a licensed financial advisor. This video is intended for general informational purposes only and should not be regarded as investment advice. Before taking any investment decision, please consult with a professional financial advisor who may assess your personal investment objectives and needs.